So Halloween Kills continues the murderous rampage of Michael Myers. So this is the continuation of David Gordon Green's 2018 Halloween, which I found really interesting. A lot of people were excited about this new version of Halloween. Now, for those who don't know, the 2018 version, if you need a little bit of a recap, it's essentially it's weird. Like it's kind of like how like the Godzilla sequels are framed. Like 2018's Halloween is a sequel to John Carpenter's Halloween, but it doesn't follow the chronology of like the second film. So basically, Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, escaped Michael Myers, and then the 2018 version, she realizes that Michael is still out there and she's preparing for it. She's suffering from trauma and PTSD. She's resorted to alcoholism. Nobody believes her. And it's only once her family starts working together with her that she's able to trap Michael Myers in a burning house and finish the job. Or so we thought. Of course, per slasher movie logic, when you want to have a sequel, there's got to be some way that the killer is going to come back. And sure enough, there's an easy explanation for it. Michael Myers was trapped in a burning building. Laurie and her daughter and granddaughter escaped. But then the fire department came and they saved Michael Myers, and Michael Myers is once more back on his murderous rampage on the same Halloween night that we ended the last film on. So yeah, it's like it's later in Halloween, but there's still plenty of time for Michael Myers to get out there and kill some more people, which he intends to do. So this sequel has the problem of not running into a whole lot more to explore with what Michael Myers has done to Laurie Strode, and more importantly to an entire community, and it doesn't really explore much of what already wasn't explored in the previous film, and at the same time it contradicts what this film wants to explore. So like first off, I'll start off with the good stuff. The good stuff about this film is Michael Myers and his murderous rampage. He kills people in a lot of brutal and shocking and frightening ways. Like he hasn't lost his stuff, like not since the last film. Like he murders people by like stabbing them in the neck. He cuts their throats. He jams stuff into their eyeballs. He gouges out eyeballs. He still hasn't lost his touch. There's a great scene where he takes a fluorescent light tube and just shoves it in someone's throat, and you can hear them kind of like breathing through the tube. Very gruesome, grisly stuff. All that stuff is fine. As a basic slasher film, all that stuff's okay. The problem with this film is that it also wants to explore how the rest of the survivors of Michael Myers are affected by this. So Jamie Lee Curtis once more plays Laurie, but she's injured, and she spends most of the film in the hospital, and she keeps talking about how Michael Myers needs to die, and I need to be the one to do it. He's pure evil, and we need to kill him. And don't worry if you missed that in the beginning, because they will tell you throughout the film constantly that Michael Myers is the true source of evil and we have to kill him. But we get all these other characters that we have to explore who have survived Michael Myers in some form or another. Some of them are like law enforcement who are trying to grapple with the fact that they had a chance to kill Michael and didn't, or they lied about the investigation. Others just barely escaped Michael's wrath, and they've been terrified of him their whole lives. And realizing all this, once they learn that Michael Myers is on the loose, they decide that, well, why don't we band together and go kill him? Which is an okay excuse for when you want to have like a high body count, and this film does have a high body count of how many people are killed. It's very, very grisly, which like I said, it's fine. The problem is that they form this mob mentality. And here's the good and bad thing about the film. The good thing about the film is they start questioning this mob mentality when it gets out of control. Like at one point, one of the other escape mental patients is on the run and fearing for his life, and he's mistaken for Michael Myers. And so the mob chases after him, believing that he is Michael Myers and that they need to kill him. And then, of course, the patient ends up killing himself just because he feels like there's nowhere that he can go for help, and this mob isn't helped. And for a brief moment, this group of survivors is like, oh, maybe we have gone too far. Maybe we've let Michael turn us into monsters. And that would have been a good moment to end the film, but instead the film keeps going and has a moment where the entire mob says, "Oh, but Michael Myers is still pure evil and we need to kill him tonight anyway." So, like, our mob mentality isn't working, but we're still going to go with the mob mentality, even though in the end, like, this film's so frustrating because, like, in the end, the notion that if you just fight hate with hate, it won't stop it. It's a decent message, but it's contradicted at so many points in the film. And, like I said, it just creates this jarring effect. There's also a jarring element to having this balance of humor, in contrast with, like, the observation on, like, PTSD and trauma, which really conflicts at times. Like, some of, like, I can kind of understand it with, like, the tongue-in-cheek kills. Like, there's several moments where people shoot at Michael Myers and they always miss, or sometimes they try to shoot Michael Myers and they end up getting shot in the face, which, you know, understandably, it's an absurd scene. You gotta laugh at it, and it's clearly meant there for laughs. But then you have so many other humorous scenes that kind of, like, throw off the flow of stuff. Like, for one of the first, like, home visits that Michael Myers makes to is to a middle-aged couple who are talking about Laurie as someone who could kick their asses, and they kind of, like, seem like they're a little bit knowledgeable of horror films. Like, you don't question why there's a stranger in your house. You just try to get out of there. You try to lock the doors. Of course, it doesn't work, and they end up getting murdered. So it's that was okay. It's, like, kind of like a decent balance of having, like, a home of, like, humorous antics that gets savaged by Michael Myers. Pretty good stuff. Like, we got that in the last film. That's fine. I like that they developed that. The problem is it keeps going because then we get the house of Michael Myers where he grew up. It's occupied by a gay couple, Big John and Little John. And they're humorous. Like, don't get me wrong, I like their characters. I love the actors who they get playing them. They're perfect for that role. They kind of have this a little bit of, like, a dry charm to them where they're kind of like they're pretty funny. The problem is, like, they're also meant to be present when Michael Myers returns so that he can go to the spot where he looked out of the window again. So you immediately have to go from these silly antics of them trying to fight Michael Myers with cheese knives to them realizing that, oh, Michael Myers has returned and his rampage will not stop because, like, this is his home and this is where he's always going to remain. It doesn't quite, like, for me, it didn't quite have, like, a decent balance there. It always felt jarring where it's like, okay, you're trying to be funny, but at the same time, you also want to make this very serious contemplation on how Myers is, like, trapped in the past that he wants to return to, and there's so much, like, hate in the present while you're trying to figure him out. So it's strange. Like, it feels like it's trying to be a horror film that wants to say something about how mental illness is portrayed in horror, which is always rocky, and it's always been very problematic. So it's a good angle to address. The problem is it also wants to balance that out by just having your standard slasher film where there's a heavy body count and everyone tries to get their revenge on the killer and stressing that the killer is pure evil. So you have this very conflicting message of, well, maybe the monsters were us the whole time because we killed this mental patient in like a scene akin to, like, you know, like Frankenstein. But at the same time, then just go back to saying Michael Myers is pure evil and he's the source of all evil. Yes, he was in a mental institution, but he's the inhuman devil monster or whatever. Which, like, the metaphor, like, I feel like that metaphor is kind of going to be lost on some people in the ending of this film, where it essentially more or less confirms that Michael Myers is kind of sort of immortal, I guess. Like, I mean, I understand why it's allegorical, and I get the message there, but a lot of people are going to be like, well, why didn't Michael Myers die? Why didn't, like, this huge group of hate try to kill Michael Myers succeed in doing that? And it's mostly because, well, that's the message of the film. It's like, you can't just fight hate with hate because then you'll end up hurting people who didn't deserve it. And then hate will just consume you because as long as there's, I'm getting a little off into the weeds here, but essentially if you rely on hate, then a bigger source of hate will come along and, kill you as well, basically. So yeah, like, the allegory itself is a little bit messy. The messages are really jarring. And it kind of in an interesting way, it kind of highlights how you can't really address mental illness from like, at least from this angle, from like a slasher film. Like, don't get me wrong, there has been a lot of films in the past few years that have done a great job exploring mental illness through horror, and not making people with mental illnesses like the villain because of their condition. Rather, it becomes like something that they grapple with and try to like conquer. And you can see this in stuff like the Babadook does a great job dealing with grief, and The Ritual does a great job of this too. But Halloween, it feels like it's almost there, like it has a good message, but it just gets lost around the along the way, and ends up becoming this really off film that wants to be that typical slasher where it's just a killer going around killing people, but also kind of want to be a commentary on how mental illness is depicted in communities, and can have a very like traumatic and violent effect when it's not observed properly. And Halloween Kills just, it can't deliver on both. I wish it could, because it's an interesting idea, but just so much of it just gets lost in this bloody, sloshy mess of a sequel.